Now, on BBC One, Screen One presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween. Over the centuries, there have been countless reports of ghosts and ghouls, but the line between fact and fiction has always been unclear. Using the modern idiom of the outside broadcast, Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles star in Ghostwatch.
Hello, all my childrens of the night. I am Matt. This is the Old Oil House. And joining me for a special Halloween edition of a podcast that doesn't exist is George, the expert of the fornication of the mind.
Oh, wow. I've never been described as that before, but I like it. I really like it. Accurate, I think, Matt. Thank you. Accurate. Oh, man. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm very, very excited. As you can imagine, approaching Halloween and with the weather and the general arbour becoming darker and colder. Cannot wait. Cannot wait.
Remember, it's not about the self-fornication of the mind. It is about your ability to fornicate with other people's minds.
Which I do quite often and intensely.
And speaking of which, the next gentleman is an expert of the fornication of my mind. It's Adam.
Here, the ghost claims he is doomed to suffer in purgatory, often imagined as a fiery place, until young Hamlet could avenge his foul and most unnatural murder by killing Claudius.
Of course.
He does this in the Fluffenhammer as well. So sort of goes off on these wonderful random bits of poetry.
And of course,
I really like it.
And of course,
myself.
It's all very apt because what this podcast really is kind of a mashup. It's kind of a podcast that's been processed through the podcast blender. It is an amalgamation of the Creaks and the Fluffenhammer. Well, a little smidgen of a little Cyberit's put in. There is no anime involved in this, sadly. But you do have me. Oh, yes. And what we are doing tonight is... Wow, what is the best way to describe it?
Yeah, it's just general horror sound effects, I think. Clanking pipes and hissing voices, yowling cats, slamming doors.
It is literally the Creaks. It is literally the furthest corner of your mind. It is the tricks that play upon your sight, your senses, your very mind itself, which tricks you into your little box known as your imagination station. We are talking about Ghostwatch. This month.
So what you're basically saying there, Mr. Matt, is that there is nothing wrong with your podcast. Do not attempt to re-download this podcast. We are controlling the transmission. We wish to make it louder. We will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We control the horizontal. We control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour or so, sit quietly, and we will control all you hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with this podcast. You are about to participate in a great adventure, an adventure that takes you from the experiences and awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer oil house.
And pretty much.
Wow, that's going a bit further back in terms of our nostalgia references. In fact, I think that predates most of us, to be perfectly honest. Certainly the original series of The Outer Limits.
Now, pretty much, in layman's terms, everything of which Adam just said there was completely and utterly accurate. To take away from the announcement, the announcer that gave us the show, basically what you're about to experience is an amalgamation, the merging of what seems to be reality and what could not be. This is pretty much our interpretation of something which happened 25 years ago. Now, on paper, Ghostwatch was a play written by Stephen Volk and directed by Leslie Manning. It had actors in it to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. What we actually got, what we were believed to think we were watching, was a late-night light entertainment show about ghosts, things that bump in the night. Not, something simple, something harmless, something which, it's just a bit of harmless fun. You can go to bed at night, suitably entertained. It had Michael Parkinson in it. Good old trustworthy Michael Parkinson. It had Sarah Green, she of Going Live. So what could possibly go on? Bring your kids. It's got kids presenters in this. Go watch. Go watch as a nice, fulfilled family. It had Craig Charles from Red Dwarf in it, outside in the street, being the man of the people. And then finally it had Mike Smith, the man connecting the BBC to that of the general public. If you phoned in, you get to speak to the nice man. Or you thought you did. It was all presented as real as possibly could be. And my God, the BBC were not prepared they just were not prepared for what happened a good week afterwards.
What the BBC managed to achieve here was something very much akin to what the Blair Witch Project achieved maybe 7-8 years later, something like that, where they brought something out. And this is not a new idea. I mean, this is very much the same vein as Orson Welles' War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
It's very much the same vein as the, what the hell was it called? The Quatermass in the Pit.
Oh, Quatermass, yeah.
Yeah. I always call him Quatermass. I need to stop doing that. The ghosts of classic sci-fi adventurers will come and haunt you if you do it again.
But no, you're absolutely right, Adam. I mean, what Ghostwatch was essentially is it was a trick. It was a sort of Halloween prank that was played on the British public in the Halloween of 1992. It was advertised as though it were a legitimate documentary, as though the show was a live airing and investigation from within purportedly the most haunted house in the UK, number something Fox Hill Drive. When in fact it was a play. Everything was staged, everything was contrived, and controlled down to the most minute detail. Of course, the viewing public didn't know this. They didn't know this. I think perhaps the biggest mistake on behalf of the creators was relying upon the ability of the British public to understand that it was fiction, that it wasn't real, to be in on the joke. Which, if you watch some of the documentaries with the writer Stephen Volk and some of the other people involved, they did believe that that's what would happen. They believed that people would get it as the show was progressing. They believed that as the events escalated within the house, and by God they do. For those of you who remember the show or who have seen it since, they really escalate. It becomes clear that it's fiction. It becomes more narrative as it goes along. You know what the big problem was? People didn't watch it all the way. They turned off because they were so scared.
Yeah. Before we get into the real nitty-gritty about this, though, let's move on to the first topic of conversation here. Now, as I said before, Ghostwatch was, all intents and purposes, a play. It was intended to be a play, nothing more, nothing less. It was 91 minutes long. Originally, it's interesting that Adams brought up Quatermass because a lot of the core essence of Ghostwatch is very much steeped in the Quatermass serialization format. It was originally intended to be a 6-part serialized play, based on a series of news reports. No, there was not really going to be any real life personalities in it. It was all meant to be made fictional, which then built
a more traditional piece of fiction.
Yeah, and the 6th episode of that 6-part play was going to be live. They were going to shoot it live, and it was going to be the culmination of all this gradual build-up. The BBC didn't want that. They didn't. They thought there was no real sort of weight to it. But they did offer Stephen Volk basically the play for today. They gave him the Screen 1 slot. So he went back to the drawing board and said, well, I'll just do the episode 6. and throw all the other 5 parts into the build-up of, like, the first hour of the script, and then the big showcase in the last 10, 15, 20 minutes. And this is what we got. And then this is why we, you know, when that happened, that is when it started to form, let's do it as live, let's bring that element in. And that is why the real life personalities of Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Craig Charles were all brought in. Let's go back in time, and let's go back to a time where 12-year-old Matthew James Clark was very much into horror. He was a fan of things like Tales of the Unexpected and all that other stuff. But, just like everyone else described by George, he was also hoodwinked. He thought it was just going to be like a fun little, you know, little light entertainment thing. You know, put it down as nonsense and then move on with his life, because he was very
sort
much...
of like a Halloween game, almost, you know. That's kind of how it was advertised.
This'll give you a little bit of understanding about me as a kid. I was more looking forward to watching Creepshow later on in the night. That's what I was looking forward to.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking forward to Ghostwatch. That was just something to watch while I waited for the horror movie. But me and my family...
Did you actually get to watch Creepshow? Or
I did.
Were you too freaked out? Okay, yeah.
No, I watched the entire slot on BBC Two, Adam. I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it.
Sorry.
Don't worry. So, what? So I watched Ghostwatch, and to cut a long story short, I got invested in it. I believed, for the most part, for it to be real, even when they showed the writer credit right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, yeah. I mean, that was the BBC getting a bit of cold feet, wasn't it, really?
But you know what? I just thought the writer was the guy who basically gave Michael Parkinson, like, the auto cue.
Right.
You know, when you get a writer and a director, you still need somebody at the switchboard changing the cameras between the live feed and the studio, so forth.
Yeah,
and
well, given the general reaction to the show, I think either that's what most people must have assumed, or they just didn't notice.
Indeed. So I was well invested in, because, again, Sarah Green, just watched it. I think it's utter bourgeois, because I did a little bit of research coming up to this recording, and apparently, in my mind, I definitely remember Ghostwatch being talked about on Going Live and Sarah Green presenting it as real. I remember that.
Really? Oh, wow, that's ballsy.
But
I mean, really ballsy.
Apparently there was a documentary called Behind the Curtains, and they dug up all 3 episodes of Going Live that was based around the October to early November sort of umbrella around Ghostwatch, and they found no trace of Ghostwatch in any of it.
Oh.
I call that bourgeois, because I swear to God, I remember them talking about Ghostwatch on Going Live, the day of Ghostwatch. So I think it's a big conspiracy, and this is why I think this should be a Creaks. That it should be hosted on the Creaks. I think the BBC...
Do you think it's part of the BBC sort of trying to protect itself after the fallout?
I think they cut it. I think they cut it from the duplicate episode that obviously they archived after the live version. I think that got removed.
You know, as bizarre as some of the conspiracy theories in the Creeks get, and they really do, that one I think might actually hold a little bit of water, Matt, given that the BBC did disavow Ghostwatch and did do everything in their power to bury it after it aired.
Oh, they absolutely did.
It's still banned now, isn't it?
It is in a way, but not in the way you think. They basically, what the BBC did, they put a 10-year injunction against any sort of re-airing of Ghostwatch, which means there was no commercial release, there was no repeats, nothing. It was in 2002 when a VHS and DVD were finally released of Ghostwatch.
Yeah.
And ever since then...
Still...
No.
They won't ever show it on TV again. That's the thing, isn't it?
I think it will be. It will be one of these days. But last year on the BBC Store, a digital download copy of Ghostwatch was finally put out. So we are talking 24 years after it first aired on the BBC. The BBC finally acknowledged it.
That's amazing. To me, that's amazing, because For me, Ghostwatch is an amazing bit of television. I think it's an amazing experiment. I think it's very clever, and the fact that the British public and the media are in such a state, we're so infantilized by our relationship to media that we can't take it when our media lies to us, or when it tricks us, or when it treats us as sophisticates to such a degree that it causes that kind of backlash. I find that incredible and a little disheartening.
What I find weird about that, though, is... I'm sorry to interrupt there, Matt.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about that is that I watched Ghostwatch around about the same age you would be, Matt. And as much as it drew me in and it scared the living shit out of me, and it did.
If I get the maths right...
I didn't go out of that thinking that was real.
No, I don't get me wrong. I knew it was fake after the fact because obviously you had the scroll at the end where you got everyone's names with the actor's credit underneath.
Yeah.
So at that point, I damn well knew. But it still terrified me.
Yeah.
What's the other reason? Do you think that 12-year-old me knew it wasn't real?
You would have been 11 because you're a year younger than me, so you would have been even more sort of like your psyche would have been even more molded by it, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You didn't happen to recognise one of the actors or actresses, did you, Adam?
No. It's an even weirder reason than that.
Okay, go on.
Because it, as I say, it freaked me out, and I was like really spooked out about it. And I'm not gonna lie, I had trouble sleeping that night.
No, I didn't sleep at all.
Nowhere did it say in the news that night, ghosts have been proven to be real.
No. No, and the reason the BBC very, very quickly went out of their way to tell you that it was fictional. The announcer at the end did a little jokey, "Ooh, that gave me the EBGBs." But about an hour later, like after the very next program aired, they had to put a disclaimer in saying, just to remind you, Ghostwatch was fictional. And I've actually got a recording of that now. I've actually gotten an audio version of that, which I will put out at the end of this roundtable.
Brilliant. Well, the reason they had to put that disclaimer out is because as they were airing it, the writers and directors did not know this, but as they were airing it, they were jamming the switchboards at the BBC.
It was people phoning up complaining because
and people proclaiming that they were actually experiencing things, that paranormal shit was going on in their homes, that apparently according to the lady who directed the show, they had one guy phoning in who was an ex-soldier who said it terrified him so much that he soiled himself. And so on and so forth.
On a much more darker end of that, about a week after Ghostwatch aired, I believe a guy in his late teens but had the mental age of 13. And I remember this because it was one of the things they used as ammunition in the big complaining show that aired the Sunday a week after Ghost aired Watched. They used that as leverage to say, right, something like this can never be done again. Yeah. Because he committed suicide fully believing that ghosts were real and they were out to get him. So, to be fair, I had very similar feelings all the way through because, again, even though I knew the show was fictional at the end, I still believed in an afterlife and ghosts. So anything from the corner of my eye tricked me the fuck out. I didn't sleep.
Yeah, and this is very much that kind of horror as well, isn't it, Matt? I mean, the thing that has struck me, it didn't strike me at the time because I was too young. I was a kid. I was 8 when Ghostwatch aired. And it did not convince me that it was real when I was watching it. Largely, I have to say, because of my mother, who, being the mediophile that she is, recognized the actress who was playing the parapsychologist, and pointed it out to us. At which point we started watching it as a piece of fiction.
Yeah,
but man, the sophistication of the horror in Ghostwatch is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. As a kid, you don't get it. As a kid, it's just frightening. It's just scary. It's just weird,
Yeah.
but you come back to it later after perhaps having a bit more of a pedigree in horror, after exposing yourself to horror films and fiction and television and media in general, as I have consistently throughout my life, and you realize that Ghostwatch did stuff that very little fiction in any media does or has done since. The only things I can think of that are even close to the kind of tricks that Ghostwatch plays are things like marble hornets, the sort of highly experimental, again, horror that actually calls into question its own medium. Which I find fascinating. I find that an absolutely fascinating aspect of certain kinds of horror fiction, that they make the audience doubt the medium upon which it is occurring, or they somehow make themselves feel more real because the medium becomes part of the horror. It becomes part of the mythology. Very clever. I mean, that is stunningly sophisticated stuff.
Whether it was fictional or real life, that's notwithstanding, what Ghostwatch did very, very well is something that Stephen Moffat, when his scripts are well done in Doctor Who, which they very rarely aren't, but when they were, he played very well on the whole corner of your eye aspect. The whole tricking what you see, tricking your senses, that whole thing that when, to basically set a scene where when you're on your own and it's dark out there and you hear the odd tapping and you don't know where that tapping's from, or when you can imagine something that's from the side of your eye and you've got to look. That's what Ghostwatch did extremely well. Extremely well.
And you have to bear in mind, when it first aired, this was pre-internet, obviously. Yeah. You couldn't unless you recorded it on VHS, you couldn't go back and look at the scene and think, oh yeah, there was something there. Yeah, I can see it now. You would have just seen a little glimpse of something, and you would have started to doubt your own perceptions and your own senses. And that, in and of itself, beyond any overtly supernatural stuff, puts your hackles up. It makes you feel uncertain.
Yeah.
It kind of attacks you in a very fundamentally human way. It makes you doubt your perceptions of reality. And not only does Ghostwatch do that throughout, it does it very, very specifically.
Yeah.
Its first scare does that. Its first real scare does that. In the opening scene, where you've got this tracking camera footage of the purportedly haunted bedroom, the girl's bedroom, where most of the activity apparently occurs. You can see, if you watch that, the first time they show that footage, you can see a figure. You can see a figure very vaguely outlined in the left-hand corner against the curtains. It's very vague, but it's definitely there. When they come to play that footage again later in the apparent documentary, and I have to say, Parky is great. Michael Parkinson frames this so well. When they play it again, that figure's gone. It's been removed. So it makes you think, well, did I see something?
Yeah.
Or was there something there and now it's gone? Has it sort of erased itself from the footage? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it's because you physically saw it with your own eyes, but the camera did not. That's what that represents.
You know you saw it. You know you saw it, but then you think, oh, did I?
Yeah.
Did I see it?
Something like this, I think, could not work now. Not with the amount of advancement, even from word of mouth. No. Just to backpedal a little bit, just to finish my story.
Oh, yes, of course.
After I finished watching Ghostwatch, I was physically... all my other family members went to bed. But because my dad, he was born about 20 years too early, because my dad is the physical representation of what a YouTube movie reviewer is. He picked that motherfucker apart so much, it was unbearable. I wanted him to shut the fuck up. At the end. So he went through all his usual spiel, and then him, my mum, my sister, all went to bed. I was fobbing it off as absolutely fine, I'm fine, and I stayed up, and I basically watched the horror movie I wanted to stay up and watch. So obviously Creepshow over on I think it was Mr. Vibes or Dr. Vibes.
Oh, Dr. Vibes, yeah.
Yeah, so I stayed up to watch that. again, brilliant movie of its time. You know, Leslie Nielsen and all that. But then it got to a point where, okay, Matt, it's getting rather late. You really should go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. No. I did something I did not do since I was 9 years old, 9 years old. I took out my sister's black and white TV, which was my TV. It was a hand-me-down from me, because I had a colour TV at that point. But my colour TV couldn't really do what my black and white TV did. My black and white TV came from the early 70s, so it had a dial. So you could turn the frequency over to a soft white noise, a soft snowy image, so that the ambience of the white noise could calm me enough for me to try and nod off. And I was 12. The last time I did that, I was 9.
Wow.
Okay?
It scared you that much?
It scared me that it physically shook me that much. And it didn't work. I was awake the entire night. I pretty much watched the entire, in bits, the rest of the Dr. Vibes block all through BBC Two, and then I think I ended up watching the Abbott and Costello movie that finished it all off before the kids TV programming kicked on for the Sunday morning, because you had like Ovid Video and stuff.
The
BBC Two broom cupboard. I was awake the entire night, and I believe I actually did go to bed early on the Sunday night in the end. But I was up. I was that shook, and for a good week, maybe 2 weeks after that, everything freaked me out. Like everything from the corner of my eye, it really played on me. But you know what? That was an experience that, although I don't want to repeat, I have fond memories of, because me as a kid loved those sorts of, me as a kid was probably George. Me as a kid loved things like Tales of the Unexpected, all those sort of spooky stories. And I think that was the culmination of my enjoyment of horror as a genre, because after Ghostwatch, I just did not enjoy horror as much as I did after that, because there was nothing else that could really scare me as much as Ghostwatch did.
Brilliant. I mean, that's great. And, you are right, Matt. I kind of ache for those experiences, and it's largely due to the stuff I've been exposed to since I was a kid, which is generally horror media. I mean, I have memories of horror media in the same way that I have memories of the Transformers or the Visionaries, or so. That it's childhood ephemera. So something like Ghostwatch. Yeah. Was an event. It was something that I had to watch, and was a family event. Bizarrely, I mean, I'm sure there are certain people who would find that perverse, but it was a family event. I remember sitting in my living room, with my brother and my mother and my dad, who was not that interested, and being very, very excited by it, and being enthralled by it. I mean, so excited up until the point my mum pointed out that the parapsychologist was an actress who'd been in Casualty or The Bill or something.
Went on to do Holby City, apparently.
Yeah. It destroyed the fantasy of it, because it definitively demonstrated that it wasn't real. My mum kind of blew that apart for me. But we did continue watching it, and unlike most people, we watched it to the end. And it was and remains a brilliant piece of horror. It was one of the rare pieces that I don't think it scared my brother and I to the same degree it did you, Matt, but that's probably simply due to the fact that we were exposed to this stuff quite a lot when we were kids. I'd
say scaring probably wasn't so much of a word as unnerving.
Yeah, unsettling. Yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about Ghostwatch. It is not, although it does have its moments of jump scares and whatnot. They're very well framed. They're brilliant. They're very good jump scares, and B, it earns them. It frames them and builds them up in a great deal of atmosphere and very dense ideas. It kind of attunes you to react to them in a very beautiful way. And I do remember being fairly shook up by it, you know? I do remember things like looking at the curtains in my bedroom
Yep.
Yeah.
and thinking,
That was the
yeah,
Monday. That was the Monday. It was two things. My colour TV was huge. It was a big TV. It was a hand-me-down from the old living room thing. And it was like the old tube like TVs. So it had a round base. So it means that the mirror image of it, the reflection, was the whole room. And what it did, it changed the perception of a shadow cast by a couple of inanimate objects, and it made it look like a figure of a man. So I didn't see the physical image of the man in my own field of vision, even when I looked directly at it, but in the TV, it was there.
Yeah.
That was the Monday, 2 days after Ghostwatch.
I mean, I've just had a slight flashback, actually, to one of the things that unnerved me the most in it. And, you know, it wasn't even one of the scares as such. It was the little girl's description of what Pipes looks like when she sees him. I think she's looking through the keyhole of the downstairs cellar.
Yeah.
And she talks about seeing him and what he looks like. And the fact that he is this bizarre amalgam of male and female attributes, it really did shake me up, that description.
Well, we'll get to the actual what Mr. Pipes is when we'll go and break down the actual story element of this. But just to... Oh, God, I had something in my mind there and it's gone. Oh, dear. No, it's gone. But what we'll do instead is, because Adam hasn't said much in a while, Adam, your experience watching Ghostwatch.
Well, I'm going to actually tie into another podcast that we do. I'm going to tie into two podcasts as we do this. What we did that Halloween was that my mother had got us some tickets to go to Newcastle for the day on the bus, and we did that. And I went with my fistful of coupons that I had cut out of that month's White Dwarf, because we went to the grand opening of the Newcastle store. And I went and I got myself a rhino and some snotlings, and we came home and I was putting the rhino together. As people who play Warhammer would know, it means I'm in a room covered with polystyrene cement. And as a result, I'm a little bit woozing. And then I watched Ghostwatch.
Whilst you were slightly high on glue.
Yeah.
My only other...
I didn't sleep for the rest of the week. There's no two way around it.
My only other memories of a kid on that actual day was I watched Going Live, which, I'm sorry, BBC, you totally cut that out. I definitely remember Sarah Green talking about it. I remember playing with my dad, Bubble Bubble, for most of the entire day.
Nice.
On the Commodore 64, in fact.
Oh, brilliant.
And then, obviously, me staying up all night watching the Dr. Vibes stuff. That was my childhood memory of that day. Everything else is dominated by Michael Parkinson.
Who I can't get over in it. I think he's brilliant.
He is No, there's... George has it absolutely boiled down. Two things in that is... Obviously, the tricks of the mind, the whole story. Because if you break the story down, it's just generic horror fare. But the things that really pin it down are the fact that you are absolutely surprised at how well Sarah Green, Mike Smith, not so much Craig Charles. Craig Charles is just being Craig Charles in that whole thing. And Michael Parkinson, they're damn good actors in this.
They sell it.
To absolutely spoil this for anyone who hasn't seen this, Sarah Green, at the very end, when all the shit goes down, she gets dragged. Her and one of the daughters, if I remember vividly.
Yep, that's
they
right.
both get dragged into the basement by Pipes. And we are left to presume that she is killed because all the screaming stops. I'm actually getting shivers talking about this now.
Me too.
It's not so much the fact that it just stops. It's Mike Smith over in the studio. Because you forget, they're actually married. That's a husband and wife team. It's the equivalent
in
of...
fact, there is a scene towards the end where everything is starting to get bad, where he's actually it's like he's going off script,
Yeah.
And he's sort of like getting antsy and angry and sort of like, get her back, please, you know.
Yeah.
And he's sort of like, Sarah, get out, please,
It's
come out now.
It's his reactions that sells that. That absolutely sells that. And then obviously the really hokey part, which I still find to this day the hokiest part of all, is of course when Michael Parkinson gets possessed at the end.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? If people saw that, then they would get it.
Yeah.
They would understand that it was a joke, and that because it's almost like the punchline, isn't it?
Yeah. It's literally the same. Right, everything you watched just now, it was all a lie. This is this is now a movie that you're watching, and that was the reassuring bit at the end. That and the scroll at the end with all the actors' names, of course.
Yeah,
but
nobody ever saw it.
Hardly
anybody saw it because they were so scared they turned off.
Yeah, and I watched the whole thing, and so that is what really pins this down is the acting of the presenters, not so much the actors, the presenters, and all of the tricks of the mind that are put through that.
I really want to get into something here.
Before you do, I do want to. I remembered what I was going to say now. That whole thing about the phone line, because the whole thing, they urge you to phone the phone line. The phone line is the same generic call number the BBC used for all their programming. So 811-11800-181 or something like that. You used to do a little sing-song about it on Going Live. There we go.
8355.
So it was the same phone number. It was also the same phone number people used to call into the BBC. So if you were lucky, when you phoned that number, immediately they'll tell you that Ghostwatch was fiction. Apparently, according to the Wikipedia page I'm reading right now, they would tell you it's fiction, but please tell us your story. But because the phone line was clogged so much, they were just getting an engaged tone. So people, a mix of people calling in to complain, people genuinely calling in to give them their stories. It added to the experience, because if you tried to get in and you got nothing, there was no support there. No support at all. And this, again, as you said, it was before the internet, so there was nothing else you could rely on to make to go back. This is why something like Ghostwatch cannot work now.
No, I mean, to work now, it would have to be something very special. It would have to be very sophisticated. And the amount of coordination it would take would be insane. And also, it would be leaked.
Yeah.
Even if they could do it technically, someone would find out, someone would leak it, and that would be it. That would be the end of it.
And this was a time where, in order to be relevant, you had to record it pretty quick as live. Now, apparently, if you break it all down, the show was all the stuff in the house was recorded weeks before transmission, and the stage stuff was more like a few days to keep it all relevant. Even then, there's people in the street and all that. People would have gone, oh yeah, so I've got this great stuff, ain't it great? There's a camera go, oh, there's an actor there who's dressed up and he's got his face mangled.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work. It would not work now. You can't even frame it live and have people not spoil it. Anyway, Adam, you were going to say.
Yep. Now, there's something really interesting about Ghostwatch that I really want to get into. For those of you out there who've listened to the Creaks, you know that I have a love of collecting. I don't want to say real life horror stories, but these type of ghost stories, anything that's paranormal or supernatural or anything along those lines. I have a love of collecting them. I'm going to run through I'm going to run through a story, and then I'm going to get your thoughts on what that story is. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a story where there is a single mother whose husband is left and is now longer in the picture. A single mother to a couple of kids, who is experiencing paranormal experiences in a estate in East London. When they start getting people to come in to look at these events, the events get harder and stronger and more powerful, where eventually there is a manifestation of the male spirit that has been attacking these people. What have I just described?
The Enfield poltergeist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, Ghostwatch. It's what Ghostwatch is based on.
Heavily based on.
Heavily, specifically.
And I never realised when I was researching the Enfield poltergeist a couple of years back now, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I never realised just how much it mirrored Ghostwatch.
Oh, so closely. I mean, really closely. I mean, it is almost beat for beat taken from the Enfield Poltergeist. I mean, it is right down to like the levitations, the marks, the claws, the voice that comes out of one of the girls at one point.
The little girl who does something to try and make people believe that it's there, because if she does, then they won't go. They'll stay and keep an eye on things. It just lends it that air of verisimilitude, doesn't it? Of near reality.
I mean, the interesting thing about the Enfield Poltergeist is the amount of people who got involved.
Oh yeah, including the fucking Warrens.
Fuck them. Honestly. That's an entire podcast in and of itself. Those fucking frauds. Yes, they are.
Don't worry,
fucking
it's coming.
Frauds. I hate them. I hate them.
They look like what happens when Pixar characters come to life. They are the most doughy, horrible people. I despise the Warrens with every fibre of my being.
I mean, it's getting back on track. It's one of the reasons why I really love Ghostwatch, and now why I've come to regard it as not just a brilliant piece of horror, but just a brilliant piece of media.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because what it does is that it calls into question our relationship to things like media. And apparently, when I've interacted with the writer Stephen Volk a couple of times on the internet as a result of articles that I've written about Ghostwatch. And he says that originally that is what they were trying to do. They were trying to create something that called into question people's relationship to the media they consume. That wasn't just something that they accepted blithely, but which it exposed something quite dark about our general relationship to media, and that is that our relationship is infantilized. We rely upon it to be consoling and to tell us the truth, and to be sort of a paragon of virtue, to be comforting. And when it isn't, when we invert that, when it's like the good old BBC, when it's Michael Parkinson, when it's Sarah Green and Craig Charles, all these lovely, lovey-dovey people, when it's them who are lying to us, that is what arouses the negative emotion. And what Stephen says, and I largely agree, although people were scared by Ghostwatch, and there was no doubt they were genuinely scared, it isn't that made them call in such numbers.
No.
It isn't that made them pillory the BBC. What made that happen was the calling into question of a relationship that is ultimately fairly perverse. And quite infantilized and skirt-clinging and fairly underdeveloped. Ghostwatch is one of the very few pieces of media that does that has the guts to do that, and to do so in such a manner that actively distresses us. It basically, what it is, it's the protest of the infant being torn away from the nipple.
Just to let you in on something that happened while the pair of you were talking, this whole talking of Ghostwatch has sort of set me back so much, remembering like what I was feeling. Sophie, who's sitting across the across the room from me, leant over to
levitated.
She leant over to show me something with someone on the phone, which was ironically what Paul Anderson wrote on the thread I posted on the old All House about this. That's all it was. But because it was from the corner of my eye and it was sudden, I jumped from my chair. That was my wife.
There's going to be a lot of that this evening.
My wife of 9 years, near enough, who I love and adore, I was genuinely terrified by for all of 5 seconds, or even less than that.
Yeah, I mean that's the effect. That is the effect it has. It is a genuinely frightening piece of work. I mean, I don't know about you, Adam, but when I came to it again, it was much later. Because you couldn't get it. Of course, for all of us, it was going to be much later, unless you happen to be one of those guys who was working in some archive of the BBC and had access to it. I found it by accident. I found it totally by accident. I was at university, and I was sort of in the midst of this state of self-education on horror. I wanted to consume so much of horror at that point. I wanted to know what people were talking about when they referenced The Wicker Man, or when they referenced Don't Look Now, or when they referenced Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or whatever, you know. And I remember
you've just gone through my entire weekend film list.
I know, right? There was a day when I went into it was the local HMV at that point, and I bought on that day. I found Don't Look Now, I found The Wicker Man, and I found by complete accident this DVD of Ghostwatch. And I did not know it was out. I had no idea you could get it on DVD. But it suddenly, just seeing the cover, aroused all of these old associations and all of these old emotions. And I was really excited. I went back to where I was living at the time, and I watched them all. I watched them all through, and although all of those are fantastic pieces of work, and I recommend any of them to anyone listening, please go and watch those films. Ghostwatch completely took me by surprise, because when I put it on, I was saying to myself in my head, look, this isn't going to be good. This is not going to be good. It's been 20 odd years since it aired. It doesn't have the context anymore. It doesn't have the build-up anymore. It's probably going to be a bit shit, to be honest, but it's probably worth it for nostalgia's sake.
Yeah.
I was absolutely taken by surprise by how good it is.
Yeah.
By how sophisticated it is. By how it still has... I mean, okay, some parts of it haven't aged that well.
Shell suits.
The shell suits, all of the presenters are great. Some of the actors are not that brilliant, you know. So, I mean, you have to forgive them because it's you know, some of the child actors are not that great. It's fine, they're kids, it's fine. But I was absolutely flabbergasted by how it has this hideous atmosphere that a lot of really good horror films do, where it feels dirty, it feels slightly soiled and wrong, like you're being spiritually soiled by watching it. It's brilliant. It's actually... The term
you're looking for is insidious.
Yeah, it's insidious, it is.
The entirety, it's... watching Ghostwatch is like an infection taking hold. Yep. It draws it in slightly and gives you a little bit of a sniffle to start with, a little bit of a cold. And before you realise what's happened, the fever is raging. And you don't know how you got there. You've got a sort of delirium that comes at you and takes place and gets hold, and before you know it, your full grasp you're just in it full grasp, and you cannot escape in any way, shape, or form. And that is its power. It understands the very nature of how to ratchet up tension that even nowadays you're just not seeing in. I think that the best way of describing it is, when you get a good found footage movie, Grave Encounters, the original Blair Witch.
The original Blair Witch, definitely, yeah.
I know people are going to argue me on that point, but the original one is still an effective piece of work.
Oh, it's superb. It's absolutely stunning. And I know it's subjective. All found footage
of course it is.
Horror is subjective, but I adore it. I think you're right. I think they both have a very similar feeling about them, and it's to do with the sophistication of the product, but it's also to do with the sophistication of the mythology surrounding it. You have a very similar thing happening with the Blair Witch Project, which is this distortion or uncertainty between what is real and what is not. I certainly thought at one time that some of the footage in the Blair Witch was real. A lot of people did. And the same was true of Ghostwatch, of course. It's something that's quite postmodern. It's these horror films that not only question the medium upon which they occur, but they actually use it. They actually make the media part of the horror. The Ring does exactly the same thing. The Japanese horror film, The Ring. It makes it so that watching the films is dangerous, potentially. Within the mythology, it's dangerous. I mean, you have this whole thing in Ghostwatch of the communal seance, which is brilliant through electronic media. I don't think I've ever seen that in any other horror film ever. I don't think I've ever seen it. The notion of the communal seance, where everybody in the UK who is watching this program is involved. I mean, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, because it expands. Suddenly, it's not local horror anymore. It's not domestic horror. Suddenly, you've got a window into your home where the negativity, the malevolence can come through.
The seance, you may also say the expanding and growing seance of terror hit back at the BBC when there was over 300,000 calls of pure bile and hate thrown at them afterwards. And we're not joking. That is how much the Wikipedia entry says, and Stephen Falk himself also says.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Intense.
I can well believe it. I can well believe it. People were furious. They were absolutely furious. And again, I question whether that was because of the fear that it evoked, or because it damaged their relationship to something that's in their homes. It damaged their relationship to the media itself.
Right, let's look at the world of 1992 for a second, right? What do you have? Doctor Who has been off the air for a good couple of years.
Yes.
It's just more than a couple of years before it comes back. Well, we'll say now there was the TV movie we don't talk about.
Well, I can literally tell you, Doctor Who finished in December 1989. We did have Doctor Who still in the public consciousness because the BBC was mostly repeating the John Pertwee era. Between the early 90s and the mid 90s. So if anything, the incompetent Doctor in the 1990s, at least the early 90s, was John Pertwee. And then it came.
Hang on, before we get too far down that path.
Well, no, I was going to finish up anyway.
Because I just used Doctor Who as a throw out there. I was trying to think of the landscape of TV at the time. Michael Parkinson was the king of the Saturday night. He was the chat show king. He was a face of incredible trustworthiness.
Oh, totally avuncular. He was the face of the friendly BBC.
You say that, but he wasn't. This was the dying end of the Wogan era. Michael Parkinson wasn't a chat show host per se until after Ghostwatch. He had his nighttime show come back later. What he was basically a game show host. He did a series of game show stuff.
Was it?
I did not know that.
The one with the charades and stuff. That's what people knew him for. People in the immediate public consciousness would know him more as a game show host. This was his big sort of light entertainment nighttime comeback.
Right.
As for much else, there really wasn't anything like that around. I mean, there was a drama back in, I'd like to say 1990 or 91, where it was a supernatural thing with a mother and son. But apart from that, we never really had anything like this around the time that Ghostwatch came back.
The closest you got to anything like this at the TV landscape at the time is 2.4 Children, which to this day is the greatest sitcom ever made. And the one the guy who was the son of Death and Spring, I can't remember the name of it now, but you had the weird sitcoms taking place. But for the most part, 1992. The landscape is very, very safe.
Yeah.
We've come out of the First Gulf War. There's things happening all over the world, and it's the walls just come down in Berlin. The Cold War has coming to an end. You've got the face of the BBC is one of, here is where the world stands. Here is us. We are the trustworthy people that you let into your home every day, and we will tell you exactly the truth. As George says, what Ghostwatch did was turn that on its head and make the BBC very untrustworthy, which is why people went nuts. Yep. As much as it is a scary, scary piece of work, people went nuts because that trust was broken. Yeah. And it was broken intentionally.
Yes.
Yeah. That, I think, is the thing that got people. Not that the BBC turned round and said, "Oh, we got you." But it was the fact that they set people up. It was like Beatles about, you were walking into the prank, not knowing it was the prank. You
played on the entire nation.
Yeah,
exactly.
To further what Adam's saying here, actually, the BBC was very much a light entertainment medium at that point, because the biggest rated show on the Saturday night at that point would be something like Noel's House Party. And even after Ghostwatch, things like Dr. Vibe was presented in a rather sort of light entertainment-y, comedy way. The linking material between the movies was very much made out of a sense of fun. So there's every weight to everything Adam is saying here.
So it's not just the fact that it was a piece of supernatural horror which made it interesting in and of itself. It made it incongruous. It's the fact that it was daring to do something sophisticated and clever and treating its audience in a very sophisticated manner, assuming that they would get it, when they clearly didn't. When they clearly didn't.
You mentioned concrete hornets before.
Marble
hornets. See, my brain...
Concrete wasps.
Concrete wasps, yes. You mentioned marble hornets before.
Yeah.
And because you mentioned earlier, the hairs on my arm stood up, so thank you very much, George.
Good.
Thank you for the memories. You mentioned how that is the only other thing that comes close to what Ghostwatch achieved by playing with the media, by playing with what it is that you can view, and then ratcheting terror in a way that is personal more than as much as the outward bound area for the terror is for everybody. It feels personally. It feels that you are being victimized by viewing it, which is where the power comes from. The problem there is, of course, that it can only ever happen once in each type of medium. You could only do Ghostwatch once. If they'd done it 5 years after the fact, if they'd done it in 1996, it wouldn't have worked because people were getting more connected. 2000, not a chance. The only reason Blair Witch worked is because it hadn't been done before in that media, in the taking place, to be able to build. I mean, have you ever seen the documentary about the Blair Witch Project?
Oh, The Curse of the Blair Witch.
Yeah. They made a documentary on Sci-Fi about the freaking legend 6 months before the film got released.
Yeah, and it's total bullshit.
Oh, complete and utter.
Total, complete fabrication. But it's presented in such a manner that it feels legitimate, it feels real, and it references enough of reality. Because there's very much, the Blair Witch is very much, there are a lot of stories from that era of witches, of curses, of townships that are purportedly failed because of curses. There's enough of them, like the Bell Witch of Tennessee. That's essentially what the Blair Witch is based on.
The entirety of Salem's tourist information.
Pretty much, yeah. There's just enough to make it feel real, and enough in the way of obscurantism to make it feel real. It's very clever. It's a very clever thing. And of course you have to bear in mind all the other stuff that they did around it, which of course they also did for Ghostwatch. They built a mythology and then they presented it in multiple formats on sort of multiple media. So you have a conspiracy of media trying to trick the public. And now, I mean, the Blair Witch even had the benefit of being able to use the very virgin internet at that point, setting up missing persons websites and false police report websites and stuff like that. That helped a great deal. That helped it a great deal.
So
now you mentioned there. Sorry, Matt. I'm in full flow now. You can't stop me. No, you mentioned that the Blair Witch had the internet, and that was a way of building up the concrete for the film to launch itself from. There was no internet. Well, there was an internet in 1992, but my God, nobody had it. Colleges,
God, no.
That was it. So what did Ghostwatch have to build the concrete on? And I love this.
Yeah.
Anyone remember?
I do. Go on.
The Radio Times.
Yes, it did. It was a mix. Everything. Now, what the BBC in general did, and this is why I felt that they sort of faltered in the dying bit when it got close to the bone. Not once did they say it was fictional or real.
Nope.
Not once. Not even the announcement leading up. We just got some gobbledygook out of that guy essentially, which I'll play at the beginning of this podcast.
It was very neutral language, wasn't it?
It made you feel that what you're going to watch is just some hot Halloween sort of fun schlock.
Yep.
That's literally all it was.
It gave you in the radio.
Gave you facts. That's what it gave you. It gave you Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Craig Charles, present a show about this. Basically, that's what they said.
But what they did, what I was saying before, what they did with the Radio Times, which was a piece of genius, was in the week that Ghostwatch came out, they had an interview with Sarah Green. And in that interview with Sarah Green, she was talking about the history of the house and how much she was looking forward to get into it. And when she was asked questions like, do you think anything happened? It's like, well, not really. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I'm open-minded.
Yeah.
At this point, she's recorded all of her bits.
Yeah, so she knows what's going to happen. Yeah.
And that's genius. And that is in the same way that the Blair Witch Project used the internet. Now, there's another interesting point I wanted to make here, and I do realise I am in full-blown talkie mode, so I do apologise.
No.
What does the Ghostwatch, the Blair Witch Project, Grave Encounters, The Last Exorcism, and there was another one that I thought of, Hell House LLC, and if no one's seen that one, that one, that's pretty damn good as well. These 5 films are incredibly effective as horror films, and they all have one thing in common. That thing being, it's all based in stories that you know.
Yes.
Yep. The Enfield haunting is one of the most famous hauntings in the entirety of Britain. You, as a child, may not be able to tell me what the Enfield haunting is, but you can tell me the basics of it.
Yeah.
Because it's engraved. It's in the public consciousness.
Well,
the Blair Witch Project.
Isn't it?
Very much so. The Blair Witch Project with the witch trials and all that type of thing. It's stuff that's in your head. You know about it even as a child because it's public media. It's, as I say, it's in the public consciousness. It's in the giant net that's in our brains. Every single one of these things, these films that want you to take it as being real, works because it's based on things you already know. So when the things start going south, you were kind of expecting it. The difference being, what do they do to play with it from that point forward? In Ghostwatch's case, they brought in Sarah Green, Michael Parkinson, and that gave it that level of sophistication and gravity that you wouldn't have expected from, I don't know what you'd call it, a happy horror hour or something,
sort of like a more traditional horror film, I suppose, or a more traditional piece of horror media.
But it's not a million miles away from being a Victorian ghost story either.
No, it's not.
The way it's presented.
It's the same beats, it's the same details, it's the same back mythology. The only difference is it's the medium of presentation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We will talk about what Ghostwatch directly inspired later down the road, because there's a bit of a rant right there that's already been presented by the Creaks. But I'm just going to cut you off there, because otherwise because that's my job as the host. So we're talking about, the Enfield hauntings. Let's talk about the one driving force in all of this, the one piece of absolute fiction in all of this, and that is, of course, Pipes. Pipes is a very interesting character because it's not just the phantom of one person. It's actually an amalgamation of 2 phantoms. That being a man called Raymond Tunstall, a paedophile, who himself committed suicide in the very house that the Ealing family dwelled in, himself haunted by the spirit of Mother Seddons, who was a baby farmer wet nurse for general layman's terms, who turned from child nurturer to child killer. So Pipes is the combined Gestalt entity of a man who I believe he thought he was like the direct reincarnation or the haunting of Mother Snedden. So Pipes,
something like that. He was definitely haunted by her, wasn't he? According to the back mythology, he heard her telling him to do things, which of course could potentially be another reference to another haunted house story, which is based in reality, which is the Amityville Horror.
So the ghost is.
The Warrens went to that as well.
They did. The
fucking Warrens.
Yeah.
So
when potatoes become people.
So what we have here, the actual physical representation of Pipes, is a man with his face mangled, wearing a women's schmuck dress because he dressed like Mother Sneddon's. The difference between usually when you got like these things, they have the physical sort of injuries of what they were, how they died. Not in Pipes' case. Pipes' face is mangled because his cats got hungry.
Yes, after he committed suicide, by all accounts.
So the actual the jump scares when you see the full-on face.
Mhm.
But the actual thing that really fucks with you is things like the one thing with Craig Charles, where Mr. Pipes is a casual member of the public.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you
And
know
he's
what?
just hanging
it took
out
me
there.
the longest time to notice that one.
You know, I
It's the
saw
one
it.
where he is
I
like
s-
right in front of the damn camera.
I saw it straight away. You know,
Did you?
and but I just dismissed it. You know why I dismissed it? I thought it was just a guy out trick or treating.
Yeah, you thought it was a Halloween costume, yeah?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah. That's the one I saw the last. That's the appearance
Yeah.
of Pipes I found the last. There are about 5, I think. There are 5 instances
Yeah.
where Pipes physically appears or visually appears to the audience.
Yeah.
Very often they're fleeting. They're very difficult to spot unless you are looking for
They're
them.
still looking for him, apparently.
Yeah, because you know what? Stephen Volk says there are 13.
Yeah.
Does he?
Yeah,
Oh God.
which is interesting.
Oh.
Because I certainly can't find that many.
There's apparently one that
hang on.
somebody apparently spotted, which then got disproved by the director. Apparently before because I remember this. This is like the lead up to Sarah Green's abduction / possible murdering. The mirror falls. The mirror flies off the wall and knocks out the crew behind her, or at least the
That's
cameraman or sound guy behind her.
Yeah, it
And-
smashes him in the back of the head.
And apparently before that, you see Pipe's reflection in the mirror like seconds before it falls. Apparently that was disproved.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. The ones I've seen are the one at the beginning, obviously, where he's outlined against the curtains, which is the most iconic. There's a scene very early on where they're in the kitchen and there's like all of the Halloween decorations, and there's a trail of children's pictures leading to the patio, and when the camera pans up, Pipes is reflected in the patio very briefly. There is a scene in the studio where they play the recording of the voice that came out of one of the little girls' mouths, which is like a if you look in the background, you can see Pipes in the studio, very like an outline of him. There's the scene where shit is starting to go down, where the older girl has got scratches all over her body, and they're leading her out of the room. And when the camera pans around, Pipes is there, then it pans back very quickly and he's gone. There's a scene later, one of the most overt scenes later, when things are really starting to hit the fan. You can hear noises, you know things are moving, the studio is in chaos, and the door to the cellar is partially open, and you can just see Pipes in the gap, and it slams shut. And then later on, at the very end, there's when the lights are bursting in the studio, you can see Pipes in the gantry
Oh dear.
up above.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I've seen.
Reliving it right now. Oh God.
Yeah.
We never did give a bit of context as to our way of watching this, did we? I never finished that part. By the way, I have never watched Ghostwatch since. I have the ability to. I know where to find it. I will never watch it. I will never watch clips of Ghostwatch. I cannot ever relive visually what I remember so vividly in my mind. And I prefer it that way because I think if I ever rewatch it, it will diminish it. I think in my mind of minds, this is nothing I should never re-experience because for silly reasons, like maybe I know it's now a TV show, so I can pick it apart. You know, my critical brain will take over from my logical, like my analytical brain will take over from my sort of invested brain. You know, my thinking brain, the one that sort of dredges up all of these feelings. And I think
the mammalian will take over from the reptilian.
Exactly.
I kind of respect that, Matt. I think that what you're preserving there is it has some worth. What you're preserving are your impressions of the media rather than the media itself.
And
that said, I would say if anyone out there does have an interest in this kind of fiction or in this kind of media, then go and watch it because it is such a sophisticated piece of work, especially if you have any desire to create or be involved in this kind of media, because it's like a roadmap. It tells you how to do it and how to do it well.
Yeah. And that's not saying that Ghostwatch is crap. It's nothing of the sort.
It's really
honestly
good.
think it is to respect what I saw in 1992 is, I think it's an experience that could never be repeated, and it is a part of me. It is a part of my experiences growing up, and just like real life events, the day I watch Ghostwatch will live on in my memory for as long as I'm on this world. And
Brilliant.
that's why I cannot ever rewatch it again, because it is that vivid.
It's that powerful, you know. It's
Yeah.
well worth. I mean, that's worth preserving. I would say that's well worth preserving.
Yeah, I've realised that we're now pretty much around the hour-long mark, so I think we need to start breaking this down. Is there anything else you guys want to add before I move on to the next topic of conversation?
Just regarding pipes again, I really love the back mythology for this that evolves throughout the course of the show, which is largely told in terms of exposition, really, by the parapsychologist. It's like it's in conversations between Parky and the parapsychologist and the skeptic guy that they get from the USA. You're supposed to hate him, aren't you? I mean, you know, he is supposed to be like the token skeptic who you're supposed to loathe. But what I love about it is the way that, as they're uncovering the history of Fox, because they're getting people phoning in, you know, purportedly people phoning in or you know, telling them that, we used to live near Fox Hill Drive and all this used to go on, and we know this about the house and this and this and this. And what they're building up is this notion that the house is kind of like an epicenter of negativity, that all of this stuff purportedly happened there, like not just with the guy that eventually became Pipes and the sort of female ghost that informs him, but loads of other stuff way back, so that the Pipes spectre is not a literal person. It's not like the spectre of a person. It is like a manifestation of negativity. It's something far worse than just a ghost. It's like a demon, you know.
I just want to add a correction to something I said earlier, because you just brought up the phone lines. When I said it was 300,000 in a week, I actually meant about 30,000 in an hour. The hour that the show was still on the air.
That's insane. From what I understand, that makes it the second most complained about piece of work, next to Jerry Springer the Opera.
Yeah. Which happened. It got aired.
It did.
Yeah. So, Adam, is there anything you need to add before we move to the next topic?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just leapt out of my fucking skin because my combi boiler just came on and the pipes were flying.
Sorry.
Do you know what's really weird there, George?
But
So did mine.
oh no!
But I know that's because
it's happening again, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my god!
But I know that's because there's a bath being run. So that...
Oh well, that's all right. Well, I'm alone here, so you know.
Oh man! So let's move on to the last topic of conversation, and that is what Ghostwatch inspired. And in my mind, Ghostwatch did inspire a ton of storytelling. Blair Witch, we brought that up. We brought up a load of other things. The other thing that Ghostwatch inspired was the increase of television mediums. And in particular, there is one show already covered by the Creaks that, because I didn't get a say on that show, and I'm going to bring the hell up now, I'm going to say it now. Most Haunted is Ghostwatch the fucking series. Think about it. Yvette Fielding.
It's good. Oh, yeah.
It's
yeah,
nowhere near as good. So, you know, submit one Blue Peter presenter, because Sarah Green was on Blue Peter. Submit her for Yvette Fielding. Submit the camera crew to Yvette. Instead, have Yvette Fielding's husband on the other end of the camera. Have Derek Acora be a total fucking wanker, because he is a fucking wanker. You are a piece of shit.
Wanker.
I am genuinely angry at that man.
Yeah.
everything they do on that show is pretty much a borderline recreation of what happens on Ghostwatch. I will go on further to say that I think that they do have a writer on that show. I think Yvette, I'm going to be controversial. I think Yvette Fielding is as much to blame on that fucking show as Derek Cora is. I think she's very much in that.
Oh yeah. You know, all the prominent figures on that show know what's going on. They know it's bullshit. They know it's false.
And I actually think that Most Haunted is even worse than Blink in Ghostwatch, because Ghostwatch at the end outright tells you it's fiction. Most Haunted never, ever, ever.
I think this is the point, isn't it? I mean, the thing about Ghostwatch is that it's trying to make you... It is a piece of fiction, and it's trying to make you think about things in fictional terms. It's trying to make you think about... It's actually trying to make you more skeptical, Ghostwatch. It's actually trying to make you consider and criticize your own assumptions and what you take for granted. Most Haunted is the exact opposite. Most Haunted wants you to be credulous. It relies upon you not questioning and not criticizing, and promotes itself as though it's a fucking documentary.
Yeah, it does. And that is what makes me so freaking angry. If Most Haunted happened when I was 12 years old, and I was pretty damn religious as a 12-year-old boy. You know, this is the guy that went off the other end of a primary school where the fucking head teacher was a priest. Okay?
No.
Right? Mm-hmm. If I was 12 years old and I watched Most Haunted, I would have been duped to hell. Like, really invested in that. Because it would have fueled. And still are. But
they still, even though Derek Acora in particular has been proven to be a fake time and time and time and time again.
He went into court and had to tell people it was just a show.
Yeah. But, absolutely. I mean, again, just to reiterate, I think this is the main difference. This is why Ghostwatch is fantastic and why Most Haunted is rancid.
It's
the fact that Ghostwatch is a piece of fiction that knows it's a piece of fiction, that although it initially attempted to present itself as in a documentary format to trick the audience, it did not do so in order to sort of coerce them or to pull the wool over their eyes. It did so to make them critical, to question media. Whereas Most Haunted and shit like it, you know, like the American shows, like the Ghost Hunters and all that nonsense, they rely upon credulity. They rely upon it. Even though, you know what, I mean, the worst of it is they could just be entertaining shows. I mean, I think there are two types of people who watch shows like Most Haunted. There's the people like us who watch it because it's hilarious and good fun. And then there's the people who are the problem, who take it as though it's a bloody documentary.
Me, Series 1, Series 2 of Most Haunted, I was watching regularly, and then it clicked to me that Derek Acora was full of shit, and it made me angry. Series 3 onwards, I just watched it for the entertainment value alone. Actually, on the Creaks, I'll bring it up again, Adam actually brought it up. The guy that they brought in to replace the guy, you know, went out his way to trip that show up. And that's, for me, is when it added a whole new level to it. I see. I'm gonna stand off of my soapbox now and stop ranting about how much of a despicable human being Derek Acora is. He truly is the world's biggest schmuck.
He is, he totally is. I mean, just to take my own soapbox just for 1 second, and it's not a very long one. If shows like Most Haunted have demonstrated anything, it's that ghosts categorically do not exist.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's done.
They have been to purportedly the most haunted locations, not only in the UK but across the world, and have found nothing. Nothing.
Everything that they use, all
a damn thing.
All the sciences they use in Most Haunted have all been disproved as, you know, as things they use to try and prove, but none of it's actually been proved as scientifically accurate. You know, the orbs are dust. The orbs are dust with reflected light. End of. You know.
Yeah, it's flim-flam. It's total flim-flam.
But that is what things like Ghostwatch did. It started that. It brought in a little niche that like consumable medium then latched onto.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfair in a way to say that it started it, because what it actually did, in a better world, in a world where the audience were more sophisticated, it would have ended it.
Yeah.
Because it shows you how easily you are tricked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by fiction, and that was part of its intention. But I think what it may have done is made some less scrupulous people realize, ooh, you know, people are very easily fooled by this stuff because they want to believe it. They want to believe it. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it was also the rise of trash TV at that point, of which Ghostwatch came in an early 90s sort of innocence, if you could call the 80s innocence. But yeah, it came
at
that
landscape, though. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, that came from a transitional time where the last vestiges of what old school BBC was and what it was going to gradually become up to the 2000s, because then commercial TV really rammed all that stuff to home.
I mean, the closest thing that existed to that was, you know, the closest thing that there was to Ghostwatch before it was what, Dramarama.
Yeah.
Some of the stories on that were pretty damn freaky, and they played around with what you were witnessing. Outside of that, yeah, you go on Quatermass in the Pit, and I
mean, I don't think there was anything quite like it. You know, I mean, I certainly never experienced anything quite like Ghostwatch. That's certainly not on popular television. That did what it did to that degree, and as a result evoked such a profound reaction. I mean, this is another element to the outrage. This is another element to the intensity of emotion that it evoked, and that is the fact that it did evoke intense emotion in a medium where we're so used to blandness, where we're so used to nothing.
So
stuff that consoles us, that just reinforces and tells us the same, spoon feeds us the same damn bland stuff over and over and over. And people didn't like it. They didn't like being challenged in that way.
This isn't El Dorado.
Exactly.
I'm going to put an exclamation point in there. When people were so used to Mr. Blobby.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much that.
Oh, I think we are running out now. I think we've got anything that could possibly be said about the show could be said. I will say that.
Although we didn't actually give you a blow-by-blow of what happens in the show.
No, we don't need to. We don't need to.
That's fine.
We
kind of find out.
To be honest, I think the big reveal about what happens to Sarah Green in itself is a big, massive spoiler, and I think people should watch that.
And
I mean,
didn't she have to appear? Didn't she appear on?
She did. I thought it was going live, but my memory is actually warped there. I will admit to that.
Kicking?
It wasn't live and kicking. It was the BBC Broom Cupboard on Monday. Apparently, it was Monday. She turned up on the Broom Cupboard to reassure people that she was alive and it was fine and the whole thing was fictional. And it was a big grovelling thing where I think, if my memory serves right, because they didn't want that. I'm guessing that going live didn't want that shit anywhere near them again. No. She appeared Monday on the Broom Cupboard. And she basically had to do this grovelling thing at the end. And I believe they gave a line saying, if you were affected by anything you saw on Saturday, you phone this line, basically. Let's have a talk about it. Because, so many children watched that. So many children.
But on the other hand, she once booked Ade Edmondson and Rick Mail onto Going Live to talk about the fact that they had a bottom tour.
Yes.
Which they, of course, couldn't talk about.
Yes.
And it was the most painful interview ever, and she relished it because she hated them.
That was... You presented that on a lock-in, didn't you? I remember.
I did.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the most painful things I've ever seen. And it's
brilliant.
I've never felt so sorry for two men.
But that was a weird time as well, because early 90s that happened and they did that, and then fast forward to the late 90s to early 2000s with something like SMTV Live, where the whole thing was blatantly, this is meant to be a kids show. We know there's no kids watching this. You're all about 19 years old and possibly older, nursing a freaking headache from the party you totally got leg-ended over. Eating your fry up watching us. We know it's not
Yeah.
a kid's show. Here you go. Let's have some nice adult smut on a Saturday morning. It's
Yes, pretty much that.
I will add this. The writer credit. It was unavoidable. They had to do the Screen 1 ident at the beginning. It was part of what they did because it was part of the Screen 1 anthology. The writer credit, this is where the BBC faltered. The writer credit was pretty much added the week of transmission.
Yeah.
Everything else was edited in. The writer credit was put in against the wishes of the creators. It was put there just to say, right, BBC's totally putting their hands up saying, this is fake!
It's fiction. Don't get irate about it. I mean, that's the ironic thing, isn't it? I mean, it has a writer credit right at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Which pretty much demonstrates that it's fiction. People either didn't see it or they didn't understand.
No, I totally thought it was something like a writer credit was something new they've put on here to say, right, this is the guy that feeds the lines to the presenters.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what I totally took it on board.
I just imagine that most people probably didn't even notice. You know, it's part of. It's just one of those things you don't really pay that much attention to, and it got lost.
Yeah,
It's
totally
just a part of TV. Yeah.
So we're going to end this now, and before we end, have you got anything to add? We'll get it out your system now because we're totally stopping at this point.
Okay.
I despise the Warrens.
Yeah, me too. I absolutely fucking loathe the Warrens. They're frauds. I mean, they are total fucking frauds. I think they're conscious frauds. I think they are scavengers. They gnaw on the bones and the grief of people who are desperate and who are ignorant, and they descend like flies on corpses wherever this kind of thing occurs. But beyond that, go and watch Ghostwatch.
Yeah.
You know, not you, Matt.
No, I won't. I'm done. Even talking about this now, I'm still getting the EPGBs I felt at age 12.
Absolutely.
That's how.
This
is how in the consciousness we are at here.
I know it so well now because it's become part of my annual viewing. There are certain films I watch once a year, every year, to keep myself sort of going, you know, to feed my own appetite for this stuff. Ghostwatch is one of them. It's become part of that canon because it is so good. And every single time I watch it, I get that feeling again. And I notice new things. It makes me feel something. And that is beyond. That's what I crave. That's what I ache for. If you're a horror fan, you need to watch it. If you want to know how to create this kind of story, you need to watch it. It's a brilliant piece of work.
Absolutely.
It really is.
I'm just going to end this now by saying I genuinely think that Sarah Green's career is still trapped down in that basement. And may it rest in peace. She now flies helicopters, apparently, after Mike Smith died. Because Mike Smith, one of his things was he flew helicopters, and when he passed away, she continued on the legacy, apparently. So, so she now flies.
That's quite cool.
Her thing now is she flies helicopters, and she occasionally stands in for people on This Morning. That's
Brilliant.
it.
So
Yeah.
that's great.
So there we go. So it's fine. Sarah Green is still alive 25 years later. And also, if you feel... if anything you've heard today affected you in any way whatsoever, please don't fucking come to us because we don't care.
No, we really, really don't.
But do go to the Old All House. That being theoldallhouse.weebly.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook under facebook.com/The Old All House. We do indeed have a thread about Ghostwatch. If you were around at the time, did you watch it? If so, give us your stories. Give us your feelings on how your watching thing. Tell us. We will read. We still won't care. If you feel offended by this, fuck off, quite frankly, because it was a work of fiction. And with that, I'm done. Hey, Adam.
Yes?
Where can people find you?
As far away from you as physically possible when the beatings start. You can find me, if you've enjoyed such horror that we have talked about this night, you can find me on The Creaks, a podcast where three men lock themselves in a room with a crate of beer and try to unravel a supernatural, paranormal, or conspiracy. Or, as is taking place now, we just do a character assassination on somebody.
I can personally recommend The Creaks. It's fucking hilarious.
I loved it.
Me too.
Flicking Derek Acora, deservedly so.
The Derek Acora episode is my favourite. That one and the one about the reptilians. I think those are great.
There's one about you. There's one on Uri Geller coming out this week.
Oh,
Yay!
fantastic. Brilliant.
Swiftly followed by, I think, Bigfoot. And then at some point I plan to assassinate the Warrens because I fucking despise them.
You need to get me involved in this, Adam. I want to be on The Creaks at some point.
We will work out something. I don't know how we're going to do it yet.
Very drunk.
Well, you'd have to join the room because, as I say, we get locked in. And we're about, I think the 2 episodes that are coming out will be the last 2 that you hear in the studio because we're going to be moving to a new location, which is an actual haunted tower.
Brilliant.
Which is going to be a load of fun. So that'll be quite good. And also we now have Alex Bones, our little mascot, who tells you about the frogs. If you've enjoyed me and George talking, then please find us on The Fluffenhammer, which is a look at the love and the worlds of Games Workshop and how people experience those worlds. Do we talk about the rules? Very rarely. We're more interested in people.
We like the experiential stuff, don't we? We
Very
like
much
to hear
so.
what people. We like to hear what people are inspired by and what they enjoy more than anything.
The fluff and the fun, as I
Exactly.
Other than that, you will possibly find me on other podcasts along the line, but that's all I'm going to say about that.
George.
You can also find me at rivetedsounds.co.uk, where my audiobooks are coming out. You can find me on YouTube at Gruff Nexus Audio. That's Gruff Nexus Audio.
Do you know Adam retired? You
can also find me as I'm currently writing my book, and that should be out in the next year or so.
George.
You can also find me this Halloween as I release a audiobook collection of short stories for your Halloween, which will be out the day before Halloween, all going well. It'll be £5, and it will have a really, really nice cover done by Mark Moore, who is a really talented artist.
He is indeed. Can you now please shut up?
I'm done now.
Good. George.
Brilliant.
George, where can we find you?
You can find me at www.strangeplaygrounds.com, where you'll find articles, reviews, and all sorts of waffling. You'll also find my short story collections available there, and my work with the photographer Nick Hardy. We're currently working on a project called Born in Blood. It's extremely disturbing, very graphic, and lots of fun, and all of the funds from that are going to go to the mental health charity Mind. You can also find me on the rather obscure YouTube channel Exaggerated Elegy.
Ain't that obscure. You can personally find me probably shivering in a corner, reliving 25 years of mental trauma. But other than that, you can find me...
I haven't known you that long, Matt.
Well, you've known me nearly a decade, Adam. That's scary enough. You can also... You can also find me on Twitter at Timey2Wimey. You can find me on Instagram at TimeyWimeyLimey. You can find me on Tumblr, probably not posting, probably just sharing stuff from his Instagram at Timey2Wimey. You can find me on YouTube doing absolute sweet FA, because I was awful at reviewing, at Timey2Wimey. And you can find me everywhere on Facebook if you go to the old house. And with that, we try not to give you a sleepless night, but Mary had a little lamb. Her fleece was dead as snow, and everywhere when Mary went, her sheep was sure to go.
You two are weird.
I salute you, George. was the best ending.
Yeah.
It is, of course, Halloween, and if you were with us for our Ghostwatch earlier, may I reassure you that it was just a story, and all's well here at Television Centre. Halloween continues on BBC Two now, where the marathon Vault of Horror is now showing Stephen King's Creepshow.